All right, can't play too much of that or we're going to get copyright strike. Welcome back to Disenthrall, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Patrick Smith. Today we are going to have another truth-seeking conversation, much like the last one that we had with a transgendered person. My goal in these conversations is simply that, like it will be in the title of the stream, which I may have forgotten to rename the stream. Did I? No, I did. Okay, cool. Yeah, so the goal today, my goal today is not to change someone's mind. It's not, if anything, it's to see if I need to change my own mind. It is simply kind of a quest for truth to check our premises and test our arguments and see what needs to be seen, especially when it comes to a moral argument like the one we're going to hopefully hear today with someone that identifies themselves as a moral vegan. So with that, let me welcome to the show Lindsay Thomas. She's here by audio. Welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So, Lindsay Thomas is a lifelong activist, and she's actually local to Dallas here. The last time I saw her was apparently at the Larkin Rose Candles in the Dark event that we had here very recently in Dallas. And hopefully this year she will also be helping out at Feed the Need in Dallas coming up December 7th. Which, in case somebody that watches this channel doesn't know what Feed the Need is, kind of hard to believe, but let's pretend. Feed the Need is an event where we get a bunch of people together, we collect a bunch of resources, food, clothing, toiletries, everything you can imagine, and we go out into South Dallas in the middle of winter here in Texas, and we feed the homeless, which is illegal in Texas unless you profess that you're doing it solely for the sake of a god, I believe. So we go out there, we break laws, a law that other people have been arrested for breaking, and we do it armed so that we get left alone while we help good people. It's coming up December 7th.
Yes.
If you have the ability to road trip it to see one of the greatest examples of street activism I have ever even heard of, much less been involved with, please road trip it out here to Dallas December 7th. Bring your donations, food, clothing, tents, and sleeping bags. We go back out in the middle of the night and we find people sleeping on the concrete, and we give them a tent and a sleeping bag to sleep in to at least get through a couple of the cold nights. By the way, they also made the tents illegal, so it's going to be kind of like a double righteous law-breaking whammy this year. So anyway, yeah, come on out. I'd love to have as many people as we can get. Resisting evil while doing good. It's kind of the best possible thing. Okay, so the last thing that I'll just say before we kind of get into this is I just lost it. Where'd we go? There we go. Links are at the top of the screen. The main one I want to point out is for Super Chats. If you have questions during the show, things that you want us to address, and you want to do a Super Chat, you have two choices. You can do your Super Chat through YouTube, or you can do your Super Chat through the link at the top at Streamlabs. If you do it through YouTube, Google takes 30%. FYI. It's up to you. You can do it. I'm not going to say no, but just know that Google takes 30% if you do it through YouTube. If you do it through the link, the streamlabs.com/disenthrall link at the top of the screen, then I think we get most of that minus a PayPal fee or something like that. Anyway, so with all that out of the way, let me kind of step us into this conversation in a meaningful way. So recently I was feeling spicier than normal, so I made a post to my Facebook saying something along the lines of moral vegans, moral veganism. Veganism for moral reasons is pathological altruism. Pathological altruism being, helping others to the degree that it harms you or could potentially cause harm or damage to you. And I did it to I wanted to get a bunch of people to post a bunch of spicy hot takes in the comments, but I was an idiot and thought that would happen, and instead it turned into mostly a vegan debate, which I should have been able to predict. But, from that conversation, or in that conversation, Lindsay started interacting, and we went back and forth for a day or two, and it resulted in an invitation to appear on the show to actually get somewhere productive, unlike most of the conversation that happened on social media. And with that said, Lindsay is one of the rare gems that actually takes you up on an offer to a real conversation off of social media. So I want to start by thanking, congratulating, and saying that I respect you for not being one of the vapid masses that keyboard pound on Facebook and then disappear when you actually want to get, have a real conversation. So mad props and respect to you, Lindsay, for having the, balls and gumption and willingness to actually come here and talk about what you believe.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely likewise. That's what we, Tom and I, we absolutely love about you. And you definitely have a way to incite a good civil debate all the time. We talk about your comments often, and we always he's a really, he defines his terms, and he's civil, and same thing. So feelings mutual. So thank you.
Awesome. Then it was, and I'm sorry for not remembering that we had met at the Larkin thing before. I know that you had told. It's hard to keep up with people that I meet these days, so I apologize for that. And it's cool that you're here local in Dallas, and I look forward to doing some real good at Feed the Need. Okay, so I guess we could start with my position, and then I'll pitch it to you, or you can have the floor. It's up to you. Let me go ahead and start. So when I said veganism for moral reasons is pathological altruism, I want to dissect that a little bit so that maybe we can dive in. First of all, I literally could care less what people choose and choose not to eat. I'm not out in any kind of activist way to modify your diet or anyone else's diet, unless you're eating babies or people that don't consent, which isn't the case here, obviously. So I very specifically called out veganism for moral reasons. Meaning people that are making the argument that, Patrick, you are behaving in an immoral way when you eat meat. That was the specific group of people that I was calling out. I was people that are making a moral claim against my behavior. So everyone else, people that do it for health reasons, people that do it for personal subjective taste reasons, people that do it for moral reasons but don't go around trying to preach that moral ethic, put that moral judgment on other people. I literally don't care about literally any of those people. I'm only addressing the people that are making a moral sort of truth claim against people that eat meat. Did you have anything that you'd like to say before I kind of continue on? I want to make sure that I'm not just talking over you the whole time.
Yeah, no, that's good. Let's keep going. Yeah.
Okay. So veganism for moral reasons, we got that out of the way, is pathological altruism. Altruism, I think, is the important distinction. So altruism is when you're doing good, acting in a selfless way to help others, which has its own set of problems. Talk to the objectivists about that for sure. But, like what we do at Feed the Need, that is altruism. We're taking, actually, no, an objectivist might disagree. So, I am making myself happy by putting my actions in line with my virtues and what I want to see in the world. And that happiness is a selfish reason, a non-altruistic reason for me to go out and participate and help feed the homeless. So in that way, it's non-altruistic. But of course, a lot of people, most people probably even would consider it an act of altruism, especially people that are, taking resources that they would otherwise have used for, something else, and they're using it to buy supplies or whatnot to feed the homeless. And they're being altruistic by taking their resources and giving it to people that they want to help. Which in and of itself, again, this is not a situation where I'm saying you should never be altruistic. Certainly not. I'm not trying to judge anybody in that direction. And certainly, again, if you are vegan because you want to be altruistic towards these creatures, again, I have no complaints at all, even to this point. I want to very clearly delineate where my objection comes in. And so if you are being altruistic and you want to be nice and kind and reduce the pain and suffering and, quote, and violence towards these creatures, absolutely no problem. That's your life. I want you to live your life in a way that makes you happy. And if doing that makes you more happy, then please do so. No complaints there. And, but I can still apply the judgment to a behavior that I think might cause harm or might be self-contradictory. or might be problematic. And that is, I think, a case that we have here in certain situations. And that's why I called it pathological altruism. Pathological altruism is when you take a selfless act of, kindness or helping others to the point where it causes you harm or difficulty. And if you are vegan for moral reasons, that means you don't allow yourself exceptions. That means that, in all the edge cases we can imagine, shit hits the fan scenario, you're starving, or, you're caught somewhere and the only food you have is meat. If you are vegan for moral reasons, that means that that's a moral rule. You do not violate that rule. Even in those situations, that would result in you coming to harm, starving to death or being malnourished or things like that. So that's where the pathological thing comes in. If you are vegan for moral reasons, that is pathological altruism. Why is it altruism rather than a negative obligation to withhold oneself from doing harm to another being? Well, because animals do not participate in the mutual reciprocal relationship that is rights. So I've talked for like 12 minutes, 13 minutes so far, and I want to make sure I'm not just like loading you up with too much to dissect. So if you want to jump in here, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to preface this by saying, I apologize to some of the other moral vegans out there if I don't represent the accurately moral veganism. And I say that because I do take a more rational stance. And I say rational, and that's a trick language there. But I guess the first thing I want to say is I don't believe that there is any single answer to the question of, is it normally wrong to take the life of an animal? There are so many different reasons and purposes that we act every day. There's different areas of knowledge that we have. And my issue, and I'm so glad that you went through that explanation, Patrick, because there was a few things that you were able to clear up just by having this conversation for me, and that was important for me. So morally, I think what I understand is that your argument of why it is morally, that veganism isn't morally aligned with, or can be morally aligned with, let's say, the NAP, or we can extend those rights to animals, is because they don't have moral agency. They don't have the ability to think rationally. Is that accurate, or do you want to correct me?
Yeah, so this goes to this sort of definition that I've worked out. I've spent a couple of years now trying to work on this, because it affects almost like literally every situation where anyone discusses any rights at all. It's everything from property to abortion to eating meat to it's just everything. And in my opinion, it's really underdefined by most people thinking in these spaces, even libertarians. What are rights and who gets them? And people that have watched this channel have heard me give this rant a million times. But for the new people, I want to give it again briefly. What are rights and who gets them are fundamental questions that you have to begin most of these discussions by answering. Rights are mutual, reciprocal understandings between sentient people. Every word of that is important, and if you change any of it, you lose some of the meaning that I'm getting at, and I've worked pretty hard on getting this accurate and precise. Rights are mutual reciprocal understandings. That means that rights are just understandings. They're agreements that are reciprocated between people. Now, for two entities, it doesn't have to be humans. It could be like, let's because it's applicable to this discussion. It could be space aliens. It could be cows. It could be rocks and plants. Like if the definition does not cover all entities, then in my opinion, it's invalid to be used in this context. So they are mutual reciprocal understandings. Well, just those words alone mean that you have to be able to, you have to have the capacity to for advanced conceptualization. What that means is, like, if we're going to have a mutual understanding about this, about a right, let's call it property rights or self-ownership. If you and I are going to have a mutual understanding between us that you will not hurt my property and I will reciprocate that and not hurt your property, well, for that to be in effect, we both have to have the capacity to understand what a right is, what rights are, what property is, what the rules are in place that we're agreeing to. If we don't have the if we don't have the brain capacity, and this could go for a rock. If a rock had the capacity to understand rights and reciprocating property rules, then, you know, you could participate in a mutual reciprocal relationship with a rock for the purposes of rights. So rights are mutual reciprocal understandings between sentient people. And I define sentient non-standardly and very specifically because there are different definitions of the word sentient, and especially getting to this vegan debate or topic, sentience is used constantly, and it's used in many different ways messily. So I want to I want to razor thin. I want to define what I mean when I say sentience. It's two capacities. Conspiracy against transparency, just sub. Thank you, sir. Two capacities. An advanced capacity to conceptualize things like rights. What are right? You know, like what this thing is called a right. For example, property rights. Owning property, homesteading property, leaving other people's property alone because you want them to reciprocate and leave your property alone. You know, the ability, the capacity to understand and comprehend that has to be a prerequisite for participating with rights. Because if you can't understand something, you cannot participate in that discussion. You don't exist in that world, so to speak. The second capacity is one of sort of like a capacity to imagine a future state, like a far future state that you find preferred. Imagine a bunch of them. Compare the different future states. Pick the one that you want your life to become one day. Then imagine plans to achieve that preferred future state. Select the optimum plan to achieve the preferred future state, and then take action or inaction in the case of deferred gratification to then eventually reach that preferred future state. And why is that important to rights? Well, because if we can't plan our actions in an intentional way based on advanced reasoning and forethought, then again, even if we understood what property rights are, if we lack the capacity to direct our behavior in an intentional way, you can't participate. You may understand what property rights are, but if you can't control yourself, you still aren't going to be able to reciprocate with other people. So that's why those are the two pieces of sentience as I use it in this sentence. Rights are mutually reciprocal understandings between sentient beings. And again, it could be humans, aliens, rocks, plants, animals, whatever. If it's sentient and it participates in the reciprocal agreement around rights, then it should be afforded rights, which was the second part of the definition, which doesn't really, I mean, I guess you could, it does apply here. So, and I'm sorry to keep repeating myself. It's just it's very specific. So rights are mutually reciprocal agreements between sentient beings that should be afforded to all those who are or will become sentient. And we could talk about that as well. So the last thing I'll say before I kick it for you, and a bunch of people are telling me they're not getting notifications for the live streams on the channel. And this is the first time I've had a lot of people telling me that. Apparently nobody got notifications and they're just finding out about it. So that's crazy. I'll have to look into it later. But that should be afforded to all those who are or will become sentient and who, you know, presently participate in the reciprocity. And this is where the altruism comes in, the difference between, you know, a moral rule that you should probably abide by, and just altruism, doing good that you don't have to do for others. That's, you know, kind of what I'm saying altruism is for the purposes of this discussion. So if I afford rights, let's say property rights, to a being that can't comprehend what that even is, or doesn't afford me that same respect in return, I'm doing it altruistically. I'm doing it with no expectation of getting that respect back. I'm doing that, you know, with no expectation of protection from that other person or from that other being. I'm just doing it to be to do what I consider to be good. And like I could not eat a cow, and the cow could walk onto my land and, without asking me, steal my grass and eat it. Like, obviously, this is a creature that doesn't understand property rights. Obviously, it can't comprehend it, and it actively does not care about reciprocating property rights with me. Otherwise, it would ask permission before eating my grass. Therefore, I have no onus, or I have no requirement to then respect that cow's property rights that it can't even understand and actively doesn't reciprocate with me. I think, again, I've talked a lot, so go ahead and jump in here if you have anything to say.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I think it's interesting particularly because when you take this approach, or when this approach is taken, not you specifically, but just in general, I feel that it's very limiting, and it narrows only to the cognitive abilities, and that then takes away from other understandings of things that we already know through science with regards to the physical body and pain and suffering. So it's interesting because you said, the rights have to be reciprocal. I feel, now this is just me being very raw, and please don't, I'm just saying what I think. I feel in general, and this isn't, towards you, this is just towards this particular argument. I question whether there's a self-serving bias there. The illusory optimism, the self-justification, the in-group bias, the idea that we're the apex predator. Of course, we get to arbitrarily make that line to say, well, if you can't cognitively communicate to me the way that I can communicate to you to say, hey, listen, let's, reciprocate rights here, then I am not going to respect your inherent right to live. And by right to live, I don't mean a right as in something that's granted from a person. I mean just a right as in the natural right of just life. The life has been given to this being, and it wasn't you that did it. It wasn't me. It wasn't anything other than we know that life created it. So, and it's here by some purpose. It's here by some way, which none of us, we didn't create it. We didn't build it. So I feel that is it's very dismissive. If we look at, so I like to look at a couple things. You explained your idea of sentience, and maybe this is something that we can talk about and try to, maybe you can understand our moral vegans positions a little bit more. We understand sentience to be a being that has the ability to feel pain and to suffer in a way that there is some level of self-consciousness, a memory of the past, expectations about a future. There is some level of self-awareness there where they can form intentions and then act on them. So, for instance, they talk about chickens in battery cages, and this is animal agriculture. They're chickens. They don't think. They don't have, they don't have these preferences. Chickens do have preferences. And it was interesting because one of the journals of veterinary medicine had put out years ago that there is harm done psychologically to chickens when they're put in battery cages because they have preferences. They have strong desires to perch. They have a strong desire to, flap their wings. They have a strong desire to lay, to nest. And when they're, when these inherent, its inherent purpose is stripped from it by a being like us, I can't help but feel that there is something that's not right. I don't feel that would be a just enough reason to say my preference is stronger than your preference, or because I have the ability to, communicate and understand things much greater than you do, that there is no reason that I should respect your your consideration of interest, and that's basically one of the a good principle that moral vegans like to employ is the principle of equal consideration of interests, being every being has an inherent value and inherent purpose just by being born. You didn't create snakes, cows, pigs. These things have been created by something much a power bigger and something that we can't conceptualize. We have no idea. We can't even recreate humans. We can't even recreate the brain. I mean, we're working on it and we're trying, and that's amazing. And I think that, just by thinking about the idea of pessimistic meta-induction, the history of science, how much we don't know, and I think that most of us would agree, especially scientists, I know this, that we can concede that knowledge it's always cumulative. We can concede that the future eras are going to have more knowledge than we do now. And some examples of this that aren't usually looked at are, for example, let's talk about language really quick. So you said that mutual rights. There has to be this mutual understanding of rights. Well, it was years ago, I think, I'm going to say maybe 40 years ago, maybe, a woman had taken a chimpanzee and was trying to teach it English, was just trying to teach it a language. And it failed miserably. She couldn't get it. She spent like 3 years trying to teach this chimpanzee English, and it just wasn't working. But then she realized that there was vocal equipment lacking in the chimpanzee. The chimpanzee didn't have the necessary, tools in its vocal box to make the sounds required for human English. So she taught the chimpanzee sign language. And this isn't Coco, not the Coco gorilla. This is a chimpanzee called Washu, I think it is, something like that. And so this chimpanzee learned sign language. And through sign language, this chimpanzee was able to understand, actually conceive and conceptualize terms. It was proven that she understood the concept of time. And it was incredible because years later, the woman who had a Washu had given her to these other people in Washington, Barbara and Fred something. I don't remember their names, but that's not important. But what's interesting is that this chimpanzee had a baby chimpanzee, and she taught the baby chimpanzee sign language, and sign language as things that hurt, ow, food, hungry, pee, poop, things like that. And that was incredible, obviously. And then obviously we've heard of the situation of Coco, which is the gorilla. And I mean, that's incredible. Over 1,000 signs that Coco can use correctly. I mean, in the correct context, and use sign language with sentences and being able to communicate. And I mean, and they've gone, forward with this with other chimpanzees and sign language where they can conceive of time. Whereas, during the winter months, they would put the candy canes on the Christmas tree when they brought the tree in. So every year around when it started to get cold, the chimpanzee would they would ask for the candy tree. And then that happened. And then for its birthday, they noticed around the same time every year, a birthday would come around and they would get a birthday cake, specifically an ice cream birthday cake. So around the same time, they actually could conceive of seasons, right? And so now these are chimpanzees and gorillas and apes and things like that. But I mean, this extends to so much more than just them. My personal belief is that there is a reasonable suspicion that these beings have the ability to feel pain, to suffer, that they have preferences, that they want to do things. Not all beings, obviously. There are some mammals that have a greater capacity for these things than, let's say fish. And that's why I said that there's no wrong answer to this. But I'm so passionate about this. Did you ever hear, Patrick, of that horse called Jim Key? Have you ever heard of the story of the beautiful horse Jim Key?
No.
So, am I talking too much?
No, you're fine. I'm just I'm opening my notepad so that I make sure I'm not forgetting any of my thoughts here. Go ahead.
Okay, excellent. So this was a horse, and this was in the 1800s. It was a beautiful story. I won't ruin it too much with all my garbage and babbling, but the takeaway points, was that there was a horse, and there was a man, I think his name was Bill Key, and he had a passion for patience and understanding when it came to horses. He was actually a slave, and it's a long, amazing story, but my point is that, well, one of my many points, is that he was able to see and invest time and energy into this horse, this horse, Jim Key, where Jim Key began being able to count. He could spell words. He was able to dial phone numbers. He could, one of the biggest events, and I mean, like, this became a national. There were thousands of people that would travel to see Jim Key, and there was, oh my gosh, it was in Tennessee, I think it was. Anyone who's listening and is interested, there was a book, and I believe that there is a possible movie in the making based on a completely true story of the horse of Jim Key. Roosevelt's daughter had gone to see him one time and brought a bunch of sixth graders, and they were going to do a spelling bee, and Jim Key, the horse, was entered in the spelling bee, and they asked the horse to spell it was a name, it was a 3-part name, and the horse spelt the name with the correct letters as fast as the sixth graders. So I think it was just like an incredible capacity to understand, just how to interact, how to things that are, it's just so much. It's just amazing. But anyway, my main goal is to make sure that we are not creating suffering that is unnecessary through our own ignorance. I'm very worried about that. And when this idea of, because they can't reciprocate rights is the only factor that's considered and eliminates them from the ability to be treated with kindness and love and respect, even though they can't reciprocate that, it worries me, because I feel that I just lost my train of thought. I feel that we would be, like I said, there'd be unnecessary pain and suffering that would happen. And that's what I was thinking. We then look at animals as objects, and that is a big problem when we look at animals as objects and not beings. And I think that that's a very slippery slope. I could concede, as a moral vegan, that I don't have a qualm, and moral vegans might attack me and disown me for saying this. But in situations where there is a natural life cycle of kill and be killed in nature, which is understandable, and when I say natural, there isn't any forceful breeding, there isn't animal agriculture, which is, considerably a new concept, considering, the time span of what we've done. If you allow beings to maintain their inherent value and to actually execute their purpose, and then you kill them to eat and to survive on that level, I don't have a problem with that, because that is, at the most basic level, nature, and we are not doing unnecessary harm and damage. But when we are, and I'll even, I'll say this, and then I'll let you pick up, Patrick, because I know you're probably itching because I'm saying a whole bunch of crap. Thanks for listening. But I even extend this to animals in the home, and pets. And this is a big thing because people have gone so crazy with me in discussions. I mean, I've had family members stop talking to me because I told them, you know, it's pretty wrong that you have a bird in a cage. You've actually bred, there was a bird that you intend. This bird has wings. It has an inherent purpose that evolution has created, that you didn't create it. And just because you have the moral agency through evolution for however that happened, and you have the ability to perceive things at a different level, in a different way, that I don't feel that constitutes or justifies treating animals like objects, putting a bird that, you know, clipping its wings and keeping it so you can look at it and have, you know, or a snake's. You know, my sister and I, we had a huge fight. She's, you know, in school to be a vet, finishing out her time, and she had a snake, and I kept telling her, you know, Chelsea, this is so wrong. And she's like, what do you mean it's not wrong? It's not wrong. How can you say that? And I'm like, well, what is your purpose? What is the purpose of keeping a snake? And she's like, well, I enjoy it, and it's fun for me. When I come home, I get to hold it, and I can, you know, play with it and show it off to my friends on Instagram and whatever. And I'm just like, okay, well, what does the snake want? Is it just because, whenever we would open the snake's cage, the snake's first reaction is to get out. It just wants to get out of the cage. And it will try. I saw this cage. It was a ball python. Her name was Aurora. She would try, if there was even the slightest bit of chance for her to get out, she would work on that little corner of the cage. And I was like, what is the snake's purpose? I don't care if it's to sit under a rock and, you know, procreate. I don't feel that your preference is, you can't justify your preference over its preference just because it can't respect your property rights. But I'm going to let you take it from there. I think I said enough.
No, that's fine. I talked forever too. So it's only fair, which is kind of the whole crux of this discussion. So, you know, if I talk for a long time, I have to expect that you're going to be able to talk for a long time too. That's how this reciprocity thing works. So you went over a lot. Let me try and get through it here. So, first of all, I have to talk about animal abuse as something that is abhorrent and terrible and disgusting and, you know, fit for the worst possible ostracization and like sociological, you know, punishments that any ANCAP or voluntarist could ever think of. You know, ostracize them from all polite society. I don't think anyone that I've ever talked to would have a problem with that. You know, if you find that somebody is abusing animals in some way, I certainly would never. I would probably go out of my way to raise money to create websites and commercials and billboards advertising this person as a disgusting asshole, fit to be disassociated from and ostracized totally. And I bet a lot of people would agree and would donate and help with that stuff, you know, like an animal abuser registrar or whatnot. So, you know, when I talk about the raw nature of ethics as it relates to animals that can't conceptualize ethics, people put me on this like, oh, he's okay with animal abusers. It's not what I'm saying. So I'm glad that I just wanted to take a moment to clarify my position on from the other direction. Next, you talked about chimpanzees, you know, having, and you listed off several attributes. They have feelings, they have desires. They can count and spell words and speak, you know, between 150 to 1,000 words of, I forgot what it was called, monkey sign language or something is actually the name of the language. And then, you know, a horse that could do some, I think you said math and things like that. Correct. You know, if I'm missing something, jump in and let me know. Thank you, Ethics. I appreciate the donation.
Is medically safe lab-grown meat immoral to consume? Would you eat it? Oh, this is gonna go through now. Cool. Streamlabs works now.
You couldn't hear it, but it was reading the donation text. So sorry about the pause. She can't hear the stream.
Oh, no
she
problem.
can only hear my voice. So that's why I'm explaining it to her. So we'll get to that question as soon as we kick it back to her. Ethics. I appreciate the donation. So none of those attributes that you mentioned when it came to chimpanzees and horses were any of the attributes that I referred to when delineating who is deserving of and capable of participating in rights. And to that end, I would point out that I'm being egalitarian across all species and even to things that aren't species like rocks. I'm being egalitarian. And what I mean by that is show me a human that doesn't reciprocate property rights. Even if he can comprehend property rights, show me a criminal, a murderer, a rapist. They're in the same moral category as animals. This is why it's so important to not get this twisted. When you commit murder, when you violate the non-aggression principle, when you stop reciprocating the mutual agreement that is rights, you reduce yourself to that of the animal kingdom. You no longer get the benefit of everyone's respect. And you no longer get to demand that other people respect your rights and your property because you have shown through action that you don't reciprocate. You don't participate in this discussion, in this relationship with other people. You reduce yourself to the animal kingdom. You put yourself on the level of rocks and animals when you do that. And so I'm not by any stretch of the imagination, like affording any kind of special anything to humans. To do so would kind of take my conception of rights out of the realm of universality and would just make it arbitrary based on species. That's not what I'm doing at all. Like, show me a monkey that can reciprocate property rights and comprehend them, and I'm perfectly fine not eating that monkey. Show me a human that doesn't, and I don't care what happens to that human. You know what I'm saying? That is the distinction that I wanted to make. I don't think people are eating monkeys and horses mostly now, but I don't think that was where you were going with it. And I'm fine with being cautious anywhere near the line of an entity that can or will possess sentience and the ability to reciprocate. Like if we have hyper smart dolphins that that get close to this conception of what are rights and who gets them. Fine, leave the dolphins alone. We don't want to get anywhere near violating somebody's consent once they've achieved the level of having consent. And I think it's an important distinction to make when you mention, like, animals feel pain, they have immediate desires, things that they want. And they can be taught to spell and communicate. I like none of that matters because, like I said, even human criminals that can do all of those things way better than the monkeys still lose their. And anybody, I think, would agree. This is just a philosophically complete way of describing self-defense. If you remove yourself from the realm of ethics by stopping that reciprocity, then people can attack you back. That's what it is. People can attack things that don't reciprocate rights. That's self-defense. That's just how it works. And to afford a criminal the respect of rights, or a murderer, let's say, to afford a murderer the respect of rights once they've already murdered, that's altruistic. You're giving him the benefit of a respect or of a negative obligation that he has not earned. And in fact, if you're near the guy and he's a murderer, you're probably putting yourself at some additional risk. So I would say that, respecting the rights of a murderer would be pathological altruism, in the same way that you could say that affording the same rights to creatures that don't reciprocate in terms of animals could also be pathological altruism. Altruism being helping people that you don't need to help or that you have no obligation to help, and pathological being, that can result in harm to you by choosing that. So the spelling, the counting, the feelings, the desires, like I'm being equitable across all species here, and including humans in this too. They can remove themselves from the reciprocity of rights. And to go to like an extreme case, we could say, severe, and again, like when we're anywhere near the line on both sides, on animals and humans, it behooves us, and it's really smart and intelligent of us to, use caution and to not assume, and to kind of afford, extra sort of consideration to people that might be anywhere near this line of deserving of rights. And so you could go to severely mentally handicapped, or like coma patients, permanent brain dead coma patients. These are human by species. Again, I'm not making a distinction by species. That's why I'm using this as an example. But they have no brain function, and they will not become sentient again in the future. And they don't have the capacity to participate in these discussions. And so, and that's how they're treated that way today. We don't let the severely handicapped people sign contracts because they don't have the capacity to comprehend what they're signing or to respect the terms of the agreement that they've made. That's why you don't sign contracts with severely mentally handicapped people. It's the exact same thing. Rights are nothing if not reciprocated. And you cannot, and you can choose if you want to be a nice person and afford rights to things that don't give them back to you. But you're just being altruistic, and in some cases, dangerously so. That was the point of the Facebook post. I keep. There's something on the tip of my tongue, and I lose it every time. Oh well, I'll move on, and if it comes up, I'll come back to it. The other thing I wanted to say is that, like, humans are the only ones currently advanced enough to even be able to have this moral dilemma trouble them. First of all, like, no other species concerns itself with this debate that you and I are having. And that is another part of this distinction. They can't comprehend it. And, even if they could, they by action don't reciprocate it. That's what it was. So let's assume, ad arguendo, this isn't the case, but let's assume that chimpanzees, horses, and dolphins or whatever can comprehend rights. Let's say they have the exact same sort of sentience and mental faculties as you and I do. You can test, and this goes to the communication problem. You can test whether or not they reciprocate, whether or not they participate in this, in the reciprocal agreement that is rights. Just by, for example, I used this example recently in a different stream, but we were talking about squirrels. And I said, if I take a nut that I own and I set it outside on a table, will that squirrel steal my nut? Of course he will, because, and even if we assume that he comprehends and has the capacity to understand rights and property rights, he is not reciprocating by his actions. So you can test the reciprocity of these creatures. You can test the reciprocity of a cow when it steals the grass. You can, and I'm making like a pedantic argument, but it is the point in and of itself. Like, animals in their action, even if you assume and give them the benefit of the doubt that they are mentally capable to understand and comprehend rights, which most of them really aren't. There might be a few exceptions. With their actions, they don't participate. And that removes them from me having any onus or obligation to respect their rights. They don't respect mine. So the thing I was going to say about humans being the only ones with this dilemma, and this is the last thing I'll say, is if animals like had the ability, just briefly, just for as a thought experiment, if they had the ability to consider this, that humans are the only ones that have this moral dilemma and that worry about affording each other rights and respecting each other's rights and property and all this stuff. Wouldn't an animal that had that brief moment to see the world in its state with humans, wouldn't they be like, well, that's not fair of those humans to be so concerned with, affording each other rights and respecting each other's stuff? Literally no other species does that. Why are they so nice to them? It's like, that is the case in point, is what I'm making here. So I'll pitch it back to you.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, great. Oh, great comments. I love your comments. I love all of your points. I still am having a problem, I guess. I would probably want to reduce this to, purpose, overall purpose, because I feel that is, as I said in the beginning, I mentioned I don't feel that there is one, overall right or wrong question when, asking, is it okay to kill humans? I don't believe that there's one answer to that. But what I would like to point out, I guess, again, is just, purpose. With regards to the rights, it's interesting because we say, oh, well, we have the moral capacity, we have the intelligence and the intellect to rationally, rationalize and to reason, and we have moral agency, and then we say, so we can, harm something if it's just, whatever. If we could just kill it because whatever. It's not going to be, it's not a big problem. They can't reciprocate rights. It's just going to be pain for a little bit. I guess it really depends on the purpose overall. And I think that's the best, for me, where I like to take this argument is, what is your purpose? What are you trying to promote? What are you trying to advocate for? For me, I feel that, as I said before, that we just don't know so much about animals. And when you, you were mentioning about some of the things that I was talking about, and about the gorillas and the horse and things like that. The reason that I mentioned that is because they were able to see themselves as distinct entities, and that is in the realm of philosophy, how philosophers would, they usually couldn't, I guess, define sentience or define, what a person would be. If you have the ability to, distinguish yourself as a separate entity, it's called like something with the mirror. I maybe you're familiar with it, but if an animal can look in the mirror and realize that that's just a reflection of itself, and not another animal, then it's like some type of test. I don't know how relevant and how much it's still used, but that's one thing that they talk about. But anyway, so my point of bringing up the chimpanzees and things like that is because, yes, they have a memory of the past. They have expectations about the future. They have a level of self-awareness, and they can form intentions and act on them. If, there was this one thing that I read about the chimpanzees where a chimpanzee in its natural habitat, there's like the hierarchies that they have. One of the scientists had put a banana in the tree above one of the leaders of the group, and unbeknownst to the leader, one of the weaker chimpanzees on the lower level saw the banana, and instead of going to get it, it actually went on the other side of the tree and just ignored it and waited for the chimpanzee, the higher ranking chimpanzee, to leave. He checked to make sure he was out of sight, and he couldn't see before he climbed the tree to get the banana. And that is an animal being able to devise a careful plan for obtaining something, and at the same time think of a future time and take precautions against his own propensity to give away the object, the object of the plan to go get that banana. The animal there is a great level of self-awareness, and he does understand himself as a distinct entity. But again, the whole reason that I'm bringing that up again is because I feel that so many of the animals, if they have the ability to feel pain and to suffer regardless of what they can or can't reciprocate, we are the moral beings. We are the apex predators. We do have the knowledge. We do have the moral agency to determine what is a quote right and what is quote wrong. We do have the ability to form these principles. They don't. So at the same time, it's like, yeah, you should more than any other creature want to make sure that if you have the ability to cause the least amount of harm at any time, you would take that route. Because otherwise, why would you not? Why would you choose to, create unnecessary harm? It's interesting because most people, when they talk about animal abuse, and you had said this, earlier, you were just like, I'm totally against animal abuse, and you made it that absolute point. Well, that's interesting. Well, why are you against animal abuse? When you say that, you don't want to, there is no reciprocation of rights. And I'm not saying that we should, should is such a very careful word that I like to tread around because I don't want to say should. But what is the best thing to do when, we have the ability to claim or to proclaim that an animal has an inherent value, an inherent purpose, and to equally consider its interests with our own versus just blatantly saying it's an object and eliminating the possibility of the us to conceptualize and then learn and be aware of the abilities and the pain and the suffering of these animals and then utilize them and to incorporate them in our own moral, principles and et cetera, because once it's interesting because what is it that you would, here, this is something that I wanted to talk about. Okay, so, and this is the best way, Patrick, that I thought to myself, I don't know if I want to use the word rights, but I know saying that an animal that has the ability, that has a central nervous system with a brain, and it has, the ability to feel pain and suffer in a way similar to humans, right? I thought to myself, how is it I don't necessarily want to give them rights, but I don't think that they should be objects. Where is a happy medium? How can we figure this out? This is something that it's semi off topic, but also on topic. Now this is pretty crazy, but I hope I'm not even sure. I'll try to be. Is there any special words? Okay, I'll just be special with what I'm trying to say, and I'll just get it out. So, do you remember hearing about that guy in Germany who put out on the cannibal website that he wanted to find someone he wanted someone to consent to being eaten? Do you remember this?
Yeah, vaguely. Yep.
Yeah. So my thing is. And I know this is crazy, but if you had a man we're humans, right, and we have the ability to consent and we have the ability to, reciprocate rights. If there was people within our, society that put out an article, an ad saying, I want to eat someone, if you want to be eaten, let me come eat you, or whatever, you need to consent. How would you feel about that? Would it be moral or immoral? And moral being defined as, what answering the question to what's the best thing to do? What should I do, right? So, and that's exactly what this guy did. He put out the ad. Some guy ended up responding. The guy came to his house. He recorded the entire thing. This is just for listeners who aren't familiar with this. This guy recorded the entire transaction where he had the guy, sign papers and say on video that he consents to being eaten. They went and they chopped off a particular body part, and they went and they cooked it. They went to eat it, and then he ended up eating the rest of him later on. After he finished him off, he froze his body parts, and then he went and put an ad in the paper again looking for someone else to do it, and that's when, someone tipped him off to the authorities. Authorities came, found the recording, found him. Now he's serving a lifetime sentence for homicide. Now, you and me, if we're thinking about, rights and consent, yeah, it's moral according to that, according to, consent, and he consented to be eaten and he consented to do it. But isn't there something about that you just know is just wrong? You don't know, you can't say, because it is moral according to consent and mutual, mutual reciprocity of rights and whatever. But something just isn't right about that. What are your thoughts?
You mentioned other things before that. Do you want me to address those specifically, or I don't know. So you mentioned animals being distinct entities. I wanted to ask you how that makes a difference. So like a rock is a distinct entity, a murderer is a distinct entity. What is different about animals being distinct entities that matters?
Oh, what I meant by distinct entity is them understanding that they're a distinct entity, that they are a being. And that's usually used with that test of the mirror, like when an animal can understand that it's not like seeing in, like 1D, or, do you know what I mean? That it understands that it is separate from everything else. It understands that it has, that it's self-aware, basically. That's what I meant by understanding that it's a distinct entity. Sorry. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I was just asking some questions that came up when you were talking. You mentioned a story of an animal waiting to eat food until the alpha was gone, talking about, making plans for the future. I wanted to call that out because it was not what I meant by that second capacity and sentience. I meant, the long-term planning, imagining a preferred future state, not in the next 5 minutes or an hour, not even in the same season, but, years into the future. This is the kind of planning that's required to sort of control your behavior within a conception of rights. And is the difference between sort of behaving out of sort of an unconscious fear that the alpha will hurt you if you take his food, and sort of saying, okay, I'm not going to take that food because it belongs to the alpha. It doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes, an hour, a day, or a year. It's still not my property. I'm not going to touch it. That's the difference when you're reciprocating rights. Then I think you said something about. Do you want to say something to that before I move on? I don't want to steamroll by and miss things.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add, you said, we having the ability to see far into the future. Let me ask you, do you believe that you have to have language in order to have thoughts?
No.
Like that?
No.
Are you sure? You said that pretty fast. That's a pretty big philosophical debate among a lot of philosophers. That is, I remember in philosophy class, that was a huge thing where they broke down, if there is no language and there are no words for concepts, there are no words for ideas that you can pinpoint and say and use in your own mind, things are just happening. So without language, without an actual language, you can't communicate, and you wouldn't be able to communicate something like so abstract as that, like children at 11. I think it's like I think it's John Piaget. The levels of cognitive development, they can't even think abstractly from like 10 to 12. Like that's like the latest. But anyway.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about something like a situation like Stephen Hawking, where he couldn't speak, but he could still have thoughts. I thought that's what you were asking.
Oh well, see, but that's it. He has thoughts because he has languages. He has a language. There is a language. I'm saying if there was no language, would you be able, if you were to put like a baby human in a forest and just let it grow up to a human adult today, and then you were to go over to it and you were to try to explain time and try to say, what do you want to do with 5 years and 5 years? Would that person be able to conceptualize that human that has the same moral agency as us right now?
I think like even if it was an alien that communicated only through like fart smells, if they reciprocated property rights, then they're deserving of the same respect in return. So like I'm not going to debate that point because what matters is the testability of their ability to reciprocate property rights. So language or not,
how are they going to reciprocate property rights? But how can they reciprocate property rights if they don't have an understanding of it? If they can't communicate it in language, the only way you and I can understand, property rights is because we have language to say, no, this is mine. This is mine. Do you think a person, a human, brought up in an adult that has the ability to moral capacity, same scenario that we just let be raised in the forest by, what is it, Mowgli or something? I forget. Or is that the person? What's the kid's name in that
Mowgli.
story? I forget. Yeah, okay. Would Mowgli, without any language, would you be able to, by seeing him, do you think he understands property rights?
Well, I don't think the only thing that we think is words. I think in pictures and in feelings and in images, things like that.
Language.
And again, anytime we're anywhere near that line of the capacities for rights, it it is really intelligent to stay away, like to back off and to afford them, like not to risk violating an innocent's consent. So in a case of a human child that was just raised in a weird environment, that's probably one of those lines where he can comprehend some things like reciprocity, and whether or not he can communicate about that. I'm not going to eat Mowgli, if that's what you're asking. I'm talking like
well,
I don't eat Mowgli.
Yeah,
I don't eat monkeys. I don't eat dolphins. I don't eat I don't eat horses. So none of the examples that are anywhere near this line is not something that I'm looking to make dinner. And so I guess that's what I would say to that. Did you have anything else? I have some more notes here.
Oh, go ahead. We'll come back to this. Go ahead. Yeah. Let me hear what else you got.
Okay. Then you started talking about sort of like purpose, animals having purpose, and it seemed to me like you're making, and you also said earlier how you make sort of a moral exception for humans in a situation where they have to kill and eat an animal to survive. This is a moral exception. This is a consequentialist argument for violating ethics based on the circumstance that you find yourself in. So like if you interpret your current situation to be to cross some threshold of direness, would you eat a human that was there with you? So like a life raft scenario, like you're stuck on a life raft, you're starving to death, and suddenly in your mind your interpretation of the situation flips such that you're in a dire situation, and now it's suddenly, morality sort of inverts itself, and now it's okay to violate people's rights, kill and eat things that you otherwise wouldn't. I don't. Can you square that circle?
Oh, well, it's interesting because I was actually thinking about that as well, in a way that would be one of the, I don't know how to say this, and I don't want to take, because I want you to be able to get all your points. I'll try to get this out as distinctly as I can. One of the most, I think, powerful arguments against veganism that I ever heard was a man saying that, he said, well, we should have the ability to kill animals when it's necessary, just like we would have the same ability to, or the same, instinct to kill a human if it was, necessary for survival. And that I agree with, because what you're doing then is you're putting the principle of equal consideration of interests on a level playing field. You're putting everybody, all animals, because humans are animals too. Obviously, that with just a different level of cognitive ability. So it's allowing you to see, but then being honest about saying, yeah, humans don't have, they're nothing special, and in a survival case, I would definitely kill another human for food if it was necessary. And my answer to that, I don't know if you would, but I think that there are a lot of things that we could do before we have to kill a human to survive. There's, down to drinking your own pee, which is there is a thing called urine therapy, and that's pretty intense. But you could fast for a pretty long time if you just get your potassium and your sodium, and if you're on the heavier side, right? So you could fast. I think there was one guy that Angus Barbary, whatever his name is, he fasted for an entire year, for 360 something days. So I think that there's a lot of things that we could do before we eat another human. But if it came down to it, and I had to kill a human to survive, I don't know about you, but I probably would. I know I would want to survive. I guess it would depend on my circumstance as well. Like, am I the only person? Is society effed, and I have nothing to look forward to, or do I have a couple kids that I need to make sure that I don't want them to be in pain and suffer? And then we re-enter that mental state of just eating what we need to survive. But like I said, animals and humans would be on that same playing field, and we would understand that we would be able to better conceptualize the respect that we, I think personally, should set aside for all animals that are not our own. And what I mean by not our own, I mean even human babies. I don't think that our human babies are not property. They are, we're just caretakers. We just take care of them to the best of our ability. And that was something that I wanted to ask you too, but I don't want to steamroll you because I know you had other topics, so I'll give it back to you.
So you would kill me if you were hungry enough?
It like I said, it would depend on the circumstance, and it would probably be not for me. It would probably be for my children. It would probably be to help my family. And yeah, there's probably nothing that I wouldn't do. I'd kill anybody that I needed to for my family in a situation that called for it. I mean, it would have to be super dire, and I'd try to do everything, down to drinking urine and eating as much as we could. But yeah, if that was the only, like I know you've probably heard of that case of the airplane where the cannibal. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where there was an airplane crash and there were 16 survivors up in the Alps, and they were eating each other to survive. So I mean, like, it depends. If I had the will and I had incentive to survive, yeah, I would do it for probably my family. But for me personally, no, I wouldn't. But this is coming from someone who is a big Second Amendment fan, and I hate to say Second Amendment as appealing to the Constitution because I think that that's garbage if it's not voluntary. But I've been held up at gunpoint in New York, and I've had some pretty crazy things happen to me, and I never would have in those cases because they were happening to me alone. I would not have used my gun to kill somebody in those instances, which is interesting because a lot of people talk about that. However, I would have used my gun in much lesser cases when it came to my family. And I can't really explain that, Patrick. I feel that I'm a very passive person. I'm not a pacifist, but I'm a very passive person. Obviously, I'm, pro-moral vegan. I don't even want to kill the little bugs and shit. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to curse, but the little bugs and crap. But yeah, if it gave me enough, there would have to be a pretty good reason, but yeah, I would. I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Well, ethics says that he bets Patrick tastes pretty gamey, so you might want to reconsider. No, but and I do have a question, a paid question as well from ethics that I don't want to wait too much longer to get to, but I want to push back. I want to caution you against the position that you just took, because I don't think you recognize the totality of your position. You're not just saying that in this edge case you're going to murder. You're saying that that is the rule that you live by. You're saying that the rule that you live by is I'm going to be ultra nice to all of these beings until it no longer suits me, and then I'm going to do whatever the hell it takes to anyone that that is necessary to sustain my life. That is a huge ethical problem, a contradiction, a hole, a break in the logic. The other thing that I would say is that how could you tell me then to not treat you with that same rule? Meaning, if I decide, based on my own reasoning, that it's time for me to kill you because it will benefit my life, you have lost the ability to object to me doing that to you.
Yeah, so these are great points, but yes, and this might be I don't know. I'll just let you guys decide how crazy and ignorant I am, but I do not believe that nature and the state of nature is moral or immoral. Nature just is. It's just a fact of is, and it's just existence. So in the state of nature, without the ability to be self-aware like you and I, we see animals kill other animals, and that is just the process. It's life and death. It's the life cycle. If in the instance that I were brought to an extremely dire circumstance to kill you, the answer to what should I do, And I mean, like, this would have to be super lifeboat scenario type stuff. But if that were to happen, it would be dependent on the survival of this species. It would be logical to maintain survival and to do it. And that's what would happen. We would then, of course, become enemies, and it would be a much different, situation, like possibly post-apocalyptic. But if you think about it, I mean, like, I know a lot of you, maybe, or maybe none of you, I don't know. I was a big Walking Dead fan. And that movie, or that TV series, every time after every show, I would sit with my friends and we would do a stupid phone call and philosophize for about an hour about all of the different choices that we could have taken and what we would do in the instance of killing people, even if we were just threatened. There was a possible threat where they didn't even, push that boundary of it wasn't an actuated immediate threat, it was a passive threat, or there was something. Yes, to survive, yes, but like I said, it would take a very different circumstance from where we are. But I feel that if we were to be reduced to that sort of life and death situation of killing, we are no different than animals. We are just animals with a higher cognitive ability, and we have gotten this by we actually don't even have to know. Some people think that it was aliens. Some people think that it was God. Some people think it was evolution. We don't know. Some people think it was a virus. Some people think it was caused by eating, meat. And then some people think it was by fire, by the ability to cook food and to get more calories. There are so many different theories. My thing is that the idea that all of our theories are fundamentally provisional and quite possibly wrong, right? Just in general. And you take that idea and understand that all of these things, I don't know what the heck I would do in a survival situation like that. I know that I would want to protect my family. I know that there would be an incredibly strong instinct for me to do whatever it took for me to make my family survive. And yes, Patrick, as much as I love you, I mean, don't worry, you wouldn't be the first person I'd go to. But it would be, you would be on the menu if it absolutely was necessary. If there was some crazy virus. I mean, like, they also talk about, cannibalism. Obviously, there are different things with that. There are these, I forgot what they're called, like some type of, there's health issues with that, like not eating the cerebral fluids, or that you could get ill from them. But they say, science says, in moderation, cannibalism, and you're careful at what parts of the human body you could eat. Yeah, do it, whatever. But I'm sorry. I hope that's. I hate to reduce it to that, and I just want to bring back the point of, this is interesting because this is even making me reevaluate the understanding of objective and subjective morality. But understanding that circumstance, time, and location is absolutely crucial to understanding, the answering the moral question of what should I do at any given time. It's going to change. In an area and a time and a location where you and I live in abundance, and we have the ability to not kill animals, and we have the ability to get all the nutrients, assumably that we would be able to get all the nutrients necessary without harming other animals. Is that the right thing to do? Is that something that we should do? Versus if we want to cause the least amount of pain, if our purpose is to cause the least amount of pain around us, well, yeah, then that would be the go-to. You know what I'm saying? But I'll let you pick it up.
Hard disagree. Hard fucking disagree with everything you just said. So I want to point out an important distinction because I don't think I communicated it. I don't think I communicated it well enough. You're not saying that in a situation of starvation or shit hits the fan, then ethics change. What you're doing by saying that you get to make up your own line when you stop reciprocating rights, what you're doing is, in a way, to a certain extent, you are not reciprocating rights now. You are saying, as of right now, this moment, you are telling Patrick that you, Lindsay, gets to decide based on her interpretation, her personal subjective interpretation of her personal circumstances, might attack me, might stop reciprocating rights with me. That is a right now thing, not a future shit hits the fan thing. You're either going to respect rights as a moral rule that applies in all times, in all places, on all planets in the universe, 1,000 years in the future, 500 years in the past. It is either a universal rule that always applies, or it's not. And what you're telling me is that you get to make up your own circumstances and your own thresholds for when you're just going to pull the object button and I got to be worried about being on the plate. That is a right now thing. You are modifying the ethical reciprocity, the ethical relationship between us right now. And I want to make sure that you recognize that when you take this position.
Yeah, I know it's pretty intense, but I mean, if it comes down to you or my family, I'm going to choose my family. I think that is, like I said, this is extremely Lifeboat. And I just want to make clear for all the listeners, I am a voluntarist and I am a vegan voluntarist. So not only do I not want to force anything upon any of you, I also don't want to, be
You're a vegan voluntarist
my
when
will
it suits
against
you.
Animals. I'm a vegan voluntarist when it suits me. I'm going to have to, I guess, I suppose. I mean, the logical thing for me, see, this is interesting. So
hold on. I'm going to adopt your rule then,
go ahead.
and we're not going to have any disagreement. I'm a vegan voluntarist when it suits me.
I think that honestly is, I think that's, like I said, I don't think that there's one answer to this question. If it needs to be somewhat objective, though, Patrick. We have to insert some type of objectivity here. Objectivity being, factual understanding of, things that are happening. Like there has to be, an extreme desperation and an extreme desperate scenario where there are, little to no other alternatives. I hope that I would not have to live in that type of circumstance or live through something like that, because it would be incredibly difficult for me to do.
If you get to make up exceptions, then so do I.
Well, that's of course it. Well, okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, do it. Let me see what you got.
I like bacon. That's my exception.
Okay, so the answer to the question, what is your purpose? Like, do you have alternatives?
I'm just operating according to your rules. You get to make up exceptions that allow you to break all of your ethical rules, then therefore I get the same. And I'm just doing that.
I can't go along with that, because you took a Lifeboat scenario, you know what I mean? Like, and I explained, that I would only do that in an extreme dire scenario where the entire paradigm of reality changes. Everything changes, right? If there is, I really don't think that if we had no food and I had to eat you, I think that violating our property rights and violating you, I think that's one of the, the least worrisome, some shit that's going to be on our mind. You know what I mean? We're going to have much bigger problems. We're going to be working, hopefully, you know what I'm saying? That there would have to be so many things that would have, with preference, there's choice. So there's 3 questions that we get with every action that we do, right? Consequence, action, consequence. And that is, what is my preference? What is my choice? And then what should I do? That's the moral question. What should I do? But there's a science to it. It can't just be some subjective thing where, well, I'm going to decide to eat you tomorrow if, I'm just walking to the store and I'm just hungry and I see you and there's no other options in sight, I'm going to do it. No, that obviously would not be aligned with what I'm trying to say here. It would have to be in an extreme dire circumstance in situations where our entire understanding of reality as we know it would have changed. You have to be able to put and check those boxes, that there's preference, there's choice, and then the answer to the question of what should I do? No, of course not. If I could get to the store and wait an hour, should I kill you? No, obviously not. If I even have to wait a week to eat, no, obviously not. If I could kill animals before I kill you, then obviously not kill you. If I could eat insects and before I kill you, obviously I'm not going to kill you. If I can eat insects and plants and, the crap, anything, bugs, whatever, should I obviously no. But in the circumstance that all of those options are eliminated and I have very few options, if little to no option, and I have the choice being presented to me, do you want to have your family? I mean, me personally, I can't say that I would, but I would do it for my family. I can say that for certain. So for me, I would say that would be probably a hard no, because it would just be myself and I, whatever. But if I had kids or, my family, then yeah, I'm going to do what it takes to survive. My question to you is, would you? And if you didn't, if it meant the death of your kids over killing me, what makes, because you see how that equalizes? It's either going to be your kids are going to die or I'm going to die. So then, yeah, it's going to come down to the animalistic cycle of life. Listen, one of us is going to die because that's the cycle of life. This is what's going to happen. One of us is going to survive. One of us is going to die. Who is it going to be? Well, who has the most power? Who has it? And that's just what it comes down to. Who's the smarter one? Who can get it done quicker and easier? Because that's what happens that's what happens in nature. That is the cycle of life. The quicker, the faster, whatever it might be, the cycle of life, the gazelle and the lion and the cheetahs and the elephants and the rhino, everything. It would come down to that. So my question to you, please, I would like to know, if it meant your children or me, what would you do? Because that's the scenario that I answered under.
I would ask for your consent, and if you said no, I would absolutely not kill you.
And you would let your children die?
Yeah.
Well,
you're either going to be you're either going to behave ethically in life or you're not. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. I'm getting messages from my wife. I'm a little distracted. I think my daughter has to go to the ER right now, so I think I'm going to have to cut this stream off, unfortunately. So let me wrap this up really quickly, and then, if we want to continue the conversation, it's like we were just in the meat of it, and now I'm having to pull the ripcord, but I've got to get her to the hospital. So really quickly, Ethics donated $1, and he asked this question. If you could briefly answer this question, and I just want to knock these out before I got to go. He asked a question to you. Is hypothetical, if hypothetical medically safe lab-grown meat, is hypothetical medically safe lab-grown meat immoral to consume? Would you eat it?
Is hypothetical lab-grown meat? No, of course it's not immoral. Causing, it's the answer to the question of what should I do. If you have preference, you have choice. If the goal in my life is to cause the least amount of harm, obviously, unless we're in some crazy situation, but a crazy situation, please, might I add. But yes, the goal would be to cause the least amount of harm. Yeah, go ahead, eat all the lab-grown meat to your heart's content, and yeah, I would eat it, absolutely, as long as it's not creating any more harm than it would be for me to experience palatable pleasure.
And then the last thing, I have to do an insane shout out to EG, who has again donated $100 via Super Chat. Says, wish you all the best to you and your family. Hope things are well. Thank you, EG. You're insane. That's all I got to say. The second thing I'll say is you should consider donating through Are You Insane? Insanity
Sorry about
confirmed.
your daughter. Best of luck.
Jesus
Love.
Christ, dude. He just donated $200. Okay, you've lost your entire mind from start to finish. But please, let me recommend that you make these massive donations using the Streamlabs donation link, because Google, you just gave Google $90. I don't know if you're aware, but they take 30%. So in the future, if you're going to continue to be insane, which you are, please use the Streamlabs link, and more of it will get to me and less to Google. Dude, you're insane. Thank you so much. Lindsay,
That's so amazing. Patrick, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Real quick, I just want to say just one quick thing. You are an amazing person, and you're a much better person than I am, and I would love to pick up this conversation again. I'd like to think about it a little, and you may have just changed my mind here, and if I can find more people like you, I think that I was answering on scarcity, and I'm not sure if I have really changed my mind, but I can tell you that I'm definitely considering it, and I know for a fact that you are a better person than me, and also I wish a lot of healing and love to you and your daughter, and I'm really sorry about that. And so thank you so much for having me. You're an absolutely amazing person in person and over the internet, and everything that you do, I totally support. You're awesome. Thank you so much.
Lindsay, it's terribly unprofessional of me to cut this off right as it was getting good. I really appreciate the conversation. Again, you know, you're a rare gem that has the balls to, you know, come on the show and actually debate and talk through and participate in the battle of ideas instead of just keyboard pounding. So thank you for that. I'm sorry we're cutting this off. I'm thrilled to hear that I might have sparked some thoughts that you hadn't had previously. And so maybe we can both take some time to digest what we've talked about and revisit. So again, with that, I'll end the show here. I do need to go. Guys, I'm really sorry I had to cut this off. EG, you're insane. Thank you so much. I gotta go. I'll catch you guys later though. So, thanks for being on the show, Lindsay, and thanks you guys for watching. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Bye, Patrick. Bye, guys. Love you.